Hey there, fellow nerds. Welcome to another episode of The Present Illness. This is the podcast where two physicians try to make sense of the world that is increasingly febrile and continues to be underdiagnosed. I'm Arga Von Salas, a surgeon scientist in your friendly neighborhood doom scroller in residence.
I'm Alyssa Burgard, an anesthesiologist and bioethicist who tracks news and health law like they're EKGs full of spikes and surprises. The Present Illness is where we dig into public health, politics, culture, and ethics with a scalpel in one hand and a meme in the other. As a note to our listeners, we often talk about tough topics that can be intense, activating, and if you need to take a break, we totally get it.
Absolutely. We want to give a big thank you to everyone who's listening, wherever you have found us, and send some extra love out to our subscribers and followers on the various platforms. And we also want to extend a special warm welcome today to anyone who has stumbled in from the many food recalls, as it's becoming increasingly unclear what we actually can safely eat in this country.
I feel like every time I open the damn news, I'm like, what the hell?
Exactly. Like every day at least, I open, Twitter or whatever, and I'm like, oh, like, so today there's two that popped up for me today. One was sourdough bread, and another one was chocolate that has Viagra in it, because that's like a normal.
Shut up. Shut up.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You just said Viagra?
Yeah, exactly.
How?
So there are two.
What? How? Those should never be at the same place at the same time.
Right? You would think. And so at first I thought it was like a contamination issue, because that's what's happening with like the salmonella in the granola, for example, which is also weird. But looking at the FDA announcement, it sounds like actually it was these two supplements that are being sold that did not declare that this is what was in them. So one is called Gold Lion Aphrodisiac Chocolate Male Enhancement Sachet.
What the shit?
Yeah. And then the other one is Elam Sex Chocolate Male Sexual Enhancement Booster. And so these...
oh my gosh, so this is like penis chocolate?
Exactly.
It's supposed to be for your penis?
I guess so. So they have sildenafil and tadalafil in them, but they didn't declare it. Yeah,
what?
I know.
What? That's dangerous.
Exactly, and that's what the issue is, right? Because patients who have nitrates that they take for other reasons would not know the risk that they would have in taking these chocolates.
What?
I know. It is wild. So that was like, what's happening? What's in the chocolate? And then we have like this very long and ever growing list of like, now there's E. coli on the blueberries. And yeah,
No.
I mean, yeah, that's a new one. Also, I don't know if you saw this, but in Dreyer's fruit bars, there are shards of glass, apparently, because that's a normal thing that you would have in fruit bars. There's,
oh my God. I mean, did somebody find glass in their fruit bar? Is that how they found this out?
I don't know how they discovered that, or the shards of glass in the sourdough. I mean, and the thing is that a lot of these people are finding out like after they already consumed the product, right? And so it's such a great feeling to be like, oh, I just had, for example, there was like the blueberries. One of the recalls was at Publix, and they're like, oh, I just had frozen blueberries from Publix. That feels good because they elevated the level of risk. They have these like different levels to be the one that includes like risk of death. So that feels good. You're like, oh, I might die from these frozen blueberries that I just consumed. So glad I'm finding out about it now after I consumed them. Yeah, same with the, like, somebody on Blue Sky actually had seen the recall notice for the fruit bars and was like, there's nothing to return because I've already consumed them. So yeah, we have this very long list. I'm not going to read it all, but there is also
people have nothing, there's nothing to eat.
Well, this is the challenge. I mean, genuinely, it's a real challenge. Like, how do you know what's even safe anymore? Because I think we talked before about the bacon recall, the beef recall, the salmonella, and the eggs, right? It's like almost 20 million eggs that were recalled. And now we have got the salmonella in the granola and also in dog food.
Granola?
Yeah.
And
granola.
dog food?
And dog food, in addition to the jalapenos, which I think we talked about before.
I'm holding my emotional support dog right now, and like, Sierra, I don't want you to get sick.
I know. Well, then somebody online was like, now they've done it. Now they've gotten the pets. The white people are going to go crazy. This is all going to stop right away.
I wish I had that sort of power.
But they're not wrong that, like, you know, some people seem to care more about when something
animals
harms a
than
pet.
humans.
Correct. Yeah. There's like pistachio nut butter. Of course, we've got the ongoing,
oh my gosh,
Taylor Farms, whatever situation with the cyclospora, which has yet to be really resolved. As we've had thousands and thousands of cases of that.
BTW, like, I also haven't heard of any other group being implicated in that besides Taylor Farms.
Yeah. So the weird thing about that is, not only a fraction of the cases were traced back to Taylor Farms. So it does seem likely that there's other products involved and we just don't know what they are. And that to me is even more concerning because, like, okay, I'm not eating lettuce, which, by the way, I would love to be eating some lettuce. Thank you very much, FDA. And I don't know what else I should be avoiding, you know, and I think we really don't know. So we're all just kind of doing the best we can. But there's also eye drops that I just saw. Like, I think it was 40,000 bottles of eye drops were recalled due to not being sterile. Things people are putting in their eyes. Anyway, the list, as I said, is very, very long, and I don't think we need to read the whole thing, but you get the sense that, like, the deregulation and the fact that they laid off like 20% of the staff at the FDA is having very real consequences for all of us. And
I was just going to say, you know, the new nominee for head of the FDA, not somebody who's going to be a friend of the pod, not somebody who's a friend. No, her name is Dr. Heidi Overton. We were going to talk about it later in the episode, but like, since you're bringing up the FDA, like, she's the one who's the nominee for FDA commissioner, and she hates trans people, and she doesn't think that people should have access to abortion. And I don't know why I'm hearing so much about that when we also need to actually have like food that we can eat.
Yes. And like, there's a lot of people being like, oh, we can grow our own food. Listen, we cannot grow all of our own foods, certainly not in a short period of time. But I believe
it's August. It's the end of the growing season, folks, for like a lot of crops.
It's true. I also don't grow granola, you know? But this person,
do you know how much work it is to like grow wheat to like make your own flour?
Oh, it's a lot. It's wild. It's labor that I don't think I have capacity for.
That sounds like that's a real trad wife endeavor.
Maybe we should do, like, maybe for a year, I'll just like pretend to be a trad wife. Do you think we can monetize it? I could like do all the things and we could see how it goes, document like a year in the life of a trad wife in her mid-40s.
I worry that you'll starve. I'm going to have to DoorDash things to you to keep you alive.
Yeah, that's real. But okay, I was going to say about Heidi Overton. My understanding is that she doesn't really have any experience with food and drugs.
No. No, she has a history of being one of the conservative movement's like chosen darlings. She's been part of the America First Foundation. She was like one of their, I think, fellows or whatever. I mean, shocker. The clown car of public health has room for more. And they're like, bring in some other political lackey to make, who isn't going to be a good public health officer. Sounds great.
Yeah, she's apparently so doubt about vaccines. And anyway, great. Hooray. So she's definitely going to turn things around.
Even Bill Cassidy doesn't think she's a good fit. And as we've talked about before, Bill Cassidy has no moral fiber to actually prevent all these people from being in charge of this country's public health. But, he also doesn't like her, in case you're wondering.
Oh, great. We'll just add it onto the list. It's like saying Susan Collins is very concerned. Okay, next.
Okay. Can we switch gears for a moment?
Yes, please.
Folks, we are oftentimes bringing you some of the toughest stories, but we try to give it with like a little levity. We had a as promised, I've been, watching our Spotify to like see if people had comments. And so we had a lovely comment from a listener. So I thought I would read it to you. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. It's from Dr. Zombie, spelled with a one for the I. I don't think they're a doctor. I think they're just maybe playing one as a zombie. Based on what they had to say. But it's a lovely review. Y'all are amazing. I love every podcast that has been added to Spotify. As for a blue collar worker that lives in the blood red state of Florida, I support everything y'all do. Love ya.
Aw, that's very nice. And Florida just had an interesting win this week. Did you see in their primaries? So Angie Nixon won the primary for whatever, I don't know which number district it is in Florida, but she was outspent by her colleague by tens of folds. Like I think he spent like something like 20 million or something, and she spent like one. Something along those lines. Don't quote me on those numbers. We can put an article that has the actual numbers in the show notes. But a really come from behind, unexpected win. She did not spend anything on media.
And she's a Democratic socialist, isn't she?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Love it.
Exactly. And she's a mom of five. She is, really sticking to her morals and her principles, which I think is a lesson for the Democratic Party. People don't want you to be like, well, I like abortion. If you like abortion, do you like abortion? Or like, I think we should, what is it you want to do? Okay, yeah, let's do that thing. No, like people want someone with conviction, which she clearly has. So congratulations to Angie Nixon and her team in Florida. And Dr. Zombie, if you live there, we are delighted for you to be able to have the opportunity to vote for her. She seems amazing.
Yay.
Yes. Okay, shall we get into our two main topics for today?
Yes. And, the first one, my understanding is we're going to talk about Jason Arday, which is a really tough story.
It is a very difficult story that I just cannot get out of, honestly, every level of my body. I think about it a lot and have thought about it a lot over especially the last week. So yeah, we're going to talk about that and I'll summarize it in a second. And then our other story is going to be a little bit about AI in medicine. So, okay, starting with Jason Arday. So Professor Jason Arday was the youngest Black professor ever at Cambridge, highly esteemed university. And unfortunately, he died last week at age 41 after being hounded by the press for weeks on end due to accusations of plagiarism and, exaggeration of his life story. And it's important to know that the campaign against him was started by a man named Nathan Coffness. Nathan Coffness himself is currently a postdoc at Ghent University, or University of Ghent. He was previously at Cambridge as a research associate, and he lost his post there because of the racist things that he said. This is a few years back. So he had
I saw an interview with him and super, super racist and very much out loud about it.
Oh, yes, definitely. So this is from his own newsletter, his Substack. He wrote, in a meritocracy, Harvard faculty would be recruited from the best of the best students, which means the number of Black professors would approach 0%. Blacks would disappear from almost all high-profile positions outside of sports and entertainment.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So he calls himself a race realist, but really he's a race essentialist, race biologist. He believes that race is a biological category and that Black people are not as smart as other people.
So he's a dumb person.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct. And so I should back up and say there had been these allegations against Professor Arday, to my understanding, mainly because he's the youngest Black professor at Cambridge. And so racist people were upset about that. And so they started digging into his past. And so there had been these allegations that he had plagiarized in his dissertation. And the university where he had obtained that degree for his PhD did an investigation. And that was concluded in February of this year. And they said, no, we don't see plagiarism here. We see some honest mistakes. So just to give you a sense, there are a few passages that are very similar to another person's in the background, okay, not in like the research that he did, but like in the background, that are similar to the dissertation of another person who he cites extensively in the dissertation, but just not right in those passages. Basically, that's the question of plagiarism. And so his university, his degree granting university, said, we think these are more likely honest mistakes and that this person probably didn't have, in our estimation, adequate supervision. But this isn't plagiarism. Like if he were going to try to pass off that person's work as his own, he wouldn't have cited that person many times in the dissertation, right? Anyway, I don't want to get too bogged down in whether he did or didn't do that, but that was the accusation. The university investigated it. They said, no, we don't think that's what happened here. That was in February that their investigation concluded. In July, Kaufness writes this essay, again on his Substack, where he rehashes all these allegations that Professor Arday has plagiarized all these things. And for reasons that may seem initially like unclear, the press ran with it. Like there were literally hundreds of articles written about this man in the span of like 3 weeks. And that essay was July 21st. On August 5th, Professor Arday resigned. And he...
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So he put out a statement that I will read you just a short bit of that I think is really telling. He said, the years since my appointment have been marked by an unrelenting level of public scrutiny and personal attack. While criticism is an inevitable part of academic life, what I have experienced has gone far beyond scholarly disagreement. The relentless accusations, speculation, and public commentary have taken a profound toll on me and those I love, and on those I love. And then he, talks about why he had tried to stick it out despite all of that, caring about the work, caring about his students and his colleagues. And he says, but there comes a point when the personal cost becomes too great. So he resigned. And I did forget to mention that he's also autistic is relevant to his story. So he resigned on August 5th. The media, multiple people had, on his behalf, basically requested that the media stop harassing him because they knew that he was unwell. He says it right there in his own statement that it's too much. Yet the media did not.
And the British media has a long history.
Correct. So that was August 5th. 9 days later, he is dead. His family obviously devastated. He was 41. He had 2 children and a wife. And there has been an outpouring of support for him and outrage for what happened after his death. His family put out a statement earlier this week. On Monday, there was a big vigil that was held for him in London, and tens of thousands of people came. And his family put out a statement where they basically said, we appreciate this, and kindness is needed in life, not just in death. So that's the kind of overall story of like what happened here. But I think there's obviously a lot more to it. There's many layers to this story. What happened, what the press did was unjust, obviously. And many of the people and outlets that publish these articles have not apologized, have doubled down on saying that this was a public interest story. And I just want to...
Oh, shut up.
Yeah, I just want to encourage people to think about anyone else who has had that number of articles written about them in hundreds of weeks. In a couple of weeks, hundreds of articles in a couple of weeks, even outside of academics. You'd have a hard time unless it's like Trump, like a head of state, maybe. But
yeah, this is not somebody who was a public figure.
Exactly. Think of even a murderer. Can you think of a murderer who had hundreds of articles?
And if the murderer was white, it would be a picture of him having a great time.
Exactly. All these men who killed their entire families. It's always them like on a ski trip or something. Those are the pictures that are shown. And so even if we narrow down into academia, There are numerous examples of white academics who have been accused of plagiarism. An example a lot of people have talked about is a man named William O'Reilly at Cambridge, same institution, took 12 pages of a student's essay, put it into his own work that he published, 12 pages. And there was an investigation and they said that it was, a mistake, whatever. He remains at Cambridge. There were a handful of articles written about that. And that was just a couple of years ago. It's not like it was 20 years ago. It's just a few years ago. Or Neri Oxman, who is the wife of Bill Ackman. Bill Ackman is one of the guys who was going after Claudine Gay, the former president of Harvard University, who is also Black. That's the only other person I personally can think of who has had this much coverage of allegations of plagiarism, and she's Black. Jason Arday, Black. And these other folks, Matt Goodwin is a Brit, former academic, now politician, who had written a book where multiple passages are fabricated. And there are footnotes that include URLs to ChatGPT. You can find a handful of articles about it, but that's it. Rachel Reeves, who is a high up politician, again in the UK, because it's all happening in the UK, had been accused of plagiarizing in a book that she published. And she basically said, yeah, I should have paid more attention. And that was kind of the end of the story. So we could go on all day. There's so many examples. And if we want to talk about research misconduct, which he was not accused of, but if we want to talk about research misconduct, we have, the former president of Stanford University, right? Lost his position, was forced to resign because of allegations of research misconduct. And did that get some coverage? Sure, it got some coverage. Did it get hundreds of articles in 3 weeks? No, absolutely not. And that was the president of one of the top universities in the world. So all that to say, not only did this campaign start with a racist and self-described eugenicist, but even if you just look at other academics who were accused of plagiarism, you see that this was not a normal response. And this idea of this was in the public interest doesn't hold any water, because who cares about academics? I mean, think about all the academics who are
how much sleep?
Well, in the Epstein files.
Oh man.
How many articles have been written about any of those folks? Nowhere near this number. What about the guy at Mount Sinai who put stitches in a young woman's forehead after she had been in a supposed accident on Epstein Island, and he did it on a kitchen table? Hundreds of articles about that? Nope, absolutely not. And all these people are pretending like this is about academic standards when clearly that's not the case. So that's one part of the story. I just want to make clear that it's definitely about race. And before I go on to the next thing, I thought actually I should play you this short clip from Nathan Kofnes so you can hear directly from him what his motivation was in doing all of this.
And is this what's happened if you don't give Kofnes a job, right?
Yeah, you got your own ways to retaliate. What are you going to do, do you think? Were you going to finish your PhD? Or no, you've already finished it. You're just going to...
No, I finished a long time ago.
Yeah, so what are you going to do?
Well, I have the job currently, and I'm still waiting for the revolution to happen, and then
it's going to take a while.
Get another job. After the revolution, I'll be the head of the Department of Eugenics and Race Science at Harvard.
So you heard him say it. One, that he's looking for an anti-Black revolution to happen. Two, you heard him say that this is vengeance for him having lost his position at Cambridge. And three, you heard him say his dream is to be heading a Department of Race and Eugenics at Harvard. And yet people out there are pretending like this has nothing to do with race. The real problem, I've had many people in my comments saying the real problem was, Professor Arday, that he, of course they don't call him professor, but that he lied, he plagiarized, it's all his fault. And even when you look at these examples I've given you of this disparate coverage, they still say, well, it's because he told these audacious lies. And so I feel like I want to share that piece of it so that the story is complete. There are allegations that things that he said about his life were not true. He, as I said, was autistic, and he was nonverbal until 11 or 12, and then wasn't able to read and write consistently until about age 18, which makes it really fascinating and impressive that he was then able to become the youngest Black professor at Cambridge, right? Given that backstory. So people are saying none of that is true. He had raised money for charity in large sums, like over $5 million. People are saying that was not true. He had talked about running, I think it was 30 marathons in 35 days as part of an effort to raise money for charity. People are saying that's not true. So just different aspects of his life story, people are calling into question, which I think is part of the kind of overboard response, right? Because let's even say all of that was a lie. What does that matter to the public? I don't know. Whether I ran 30 marathons or not, like, I don't know. I genuinely don't know what the consequence is, what the harm is. And there have been a couple of outlets now that have dug into these questions about his past and found, evidence supporting the claims that he had made, whether it's talking to classmates from his elementary school who were like, yeah, he definitely didn't really talk. He could sing, but he couldn't really talk. He had probably selective mutism. There's, he had said he played for a semi-professional football club, and there's people who played on that club were like, yes, he was our teammate. Like, why are you questioning this? There was an article that was written at the time that he was running these marathons. Anyway, so people are doing a lot of fact checking and finding support for the claims that he had made. And again, even if there wasn't, this is not
the reality is, like, I should never have to know the name Jason Arday. Like, yeah. And I obviously I know it now because he's died. And otherwise, why do I care? I mean, I'm in academics. Like, you and I are both in academic positions. Like, we kind of pay attention to what's happening in academia, but like, this is not relevant to our day-to-day lives. This is not, we don't work at that university. Like, there's just no reason for there to be this sort of scrutiny from public-facing media.
No.
And certainly not when, like,
I mean, it's like the type of thing where, okay, if there is an issue, the university should investigate it. When the university investigation is done, it's done. Like, move on with life instead of dragging it on and having this person's name really dragged through the mud in the press. Which really also, I should be clear, some of these articles really fixated on this idea that he was Black and that he was some kind of diversity hire at Cambridge, that he couldn't possibly have been qualified for this position, really taking off from Nathan Coffness's posts, which is, again, they're just running with the ideas of this racist eugenicist without, it seems, much critical thought as to why they're doing this to a man who's not a public figure. He's not rich. He's not famous. He doesn't have some influential post. He's a professor at Cambridge.
No, he's a bitter person who lost their job because their behavior was not conducive to the work environment.
Coffness, yes, absolutely. And I mean, he was also he had a conversation with another person whose name I'll forget right now, but who also is an older person who had been at Cambridge and also lost a post at Cambridge. And they're both talking about how basically satisfied they are that they were able to bring down this person and that this is the kind of revenge that they wanted because, they deserve that job and he didn't. And that's playing right into what the right wing is doing here, right, in this country. Look at our government, look at the purge that's happened in the military, with the idea being that the only people who are qualified to be there are white men. And in fact, it's such a glaring misapplication of the word meritocracy when you see the least qualified Secretary of Defense that we've ever had talking about the need for, I just saw a clip from him from yesterday talking about how we must have a gender blind, whatever, race blind, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, he's gotten rid of all the women leaders. He's stopped the promotions of multiple women leaders. He's talking about gender blind meritocracy.
Well,
it's all just,
if you're a man, that's just the default. A white man is the default human for him.
Right. Exactly. And anyone else is not qualified. Anyway,
well, so before we move on to how this clearly relates to the things that we're seeing in the United States, Kate Mann, who is a brilliant academic who wrote in her Substack, "Gossipy Academics Helped Kill Jason Arday, or the Anatomy of a Pylon," and I'll put a link to it in the show notes. And part of it as well is not just this one guy who sort of like started all of this, but all of the drama that like other academics really fed into in this thing that like really continued to give this more attention than it ever should have gotten. And Jason's the person who paid the price.
Yes. And I do want to say that like the work that he did is probably part of what motivated these attacks as well, because he worked on and studied the impact of race in higher education and the challenges that are imposed on Black and brown people because of racism. And, you know, for someone like Coffness or other people like him, like that's even more infuriating, right? Like, how dare he take this job that should have gone to a white guy in their eyes and then write about this thing that makes me really angry because he doesn't belong there in the first place. So no, I agree. I'm sure there are academics who contributed to this and continue to contribute. I mean, there's been an argument on Twitter over the last week about like what even is plagiarism and does this count or doesn't. I mean, there's some really disingenuous people saying that plagiarism is like the worst thing an academic could do. And, you know, I might suggest that something like sexual assault is worse. And there are plenty of
bad things.
There are plenty of bad things. And there are even specific, I mean, people have talked about these folks as well, specific professors in higher education in the UK who were accused of and or convicted of sexually assaulting their students. That's clearly a much larger offense, and it's so disingenuous to pretend like, oh, we have righteous anger over, you know, some miscitations essentially. And it's just been, so one of the things that struck me about this is the conversation that's happened around it. If this all had happened, say 5 years ago, I think we would be having a slightly different conversation. And I think there would be a lot more empathy for Professor Arday and his family. And I think there would be a lot more genuine effort to understand like what did or didn't happen here and what really are the implications, as opposed to what it feels like happened was just, again, people upset that a Black man had gone kind of like above his perceived station. And in the US specifically, I think we're seeing the exact same type of movement where the types of comments that Coffness has made, Coffness is American, to be clear. So the types of comments that he made, you know, if you said things like this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I think there would have been a significant backlash. But instead, he's kind of amassing a following in the same way that a lot of the right-wing extremists in this country are gaining support. And I see this in a number of ways, both in the comments that are made, like on these articles, the actual articles themselves, like what articles have been written about this, and then what I'm seeing folks say online. There's a lot of people, even after Professor Arday's death, who are still calling him a liar, blaming him for what happened. You know, the real problem was him. If he hadn't said these lies, if he hadn't plagiarized, he would still be alive. These are choices he made. Even worse, I think, are the people who are saying that actually the problem is Cambridge because Cambridge falsely elevated someone who didn't deserve to be there and they put him in this spotlight. It's so racist, the discourse that I'm seeing. And what we also have happening in this country is not just, you know, all the layoffs that are disproportionately, by the way, affecting Black people, but we have young Black people disappearing for lots of reasons, but a really unprecedented number being found hung in trees, with the police determining that they died by suicide, and Black people do not hang themselves from trees. And there have been at least a dozen, I believe, in the last 12 months or so of these young folks. Tasia Fortune is one, Kyle Basinga is another, Trey Reed. You know, I could put a list in the show notes. And we have to think about the degree to which racists are emboldened, that they think this is something they can do and get away with. And in fact, they are getting away with it. It's not even getting major media coverage. Even Nolan Wells, who we talked about before, his story didn't get media coverage until there were more and more people, majority Black people, talking about him on social media. It was the push from the people that made media cover it. Otherwise, they weren't covering that story. By the way, we still don't know what happened to Nolan Wells, and the case continues. But I just want to connect the dots, that like the same attitudes and behaviors that normalized and allowed what happened to Professor Arday to happen are also allowing for the Voting Rights Act to be gutted in this country and for Black people to go missing and almost no one to look into it, seriously look into it. I mean, we have these flock cameras everywhere, right? They can trace a woman who's trying to get an abortion, but they can't tell us who killed Tasha Fortune. Like, there's that's not credible that we don't have more information about these deaths. And so one thing I want folks who are not Black to think about is what we're all doing to raise awareness of these stories, to call out that, I mean, this is blatant racism. These are lynchings, to be clear. These are lynchings, and people have called what happened to Professor Arday a digital lynching. We can't just kind of, I mean, I know there's so many other things, and we talk about lots of things that are happening, but this is a major threat to Black people. And it seems not exclusively, but almost exclusively, they're the only ones talking about it. And we know historically that's not going to lead to a change. And so the rest of us need to be thinking about how to keep drawing attention to these stories, how to question the narratives that are put in front of us, and how to hold accountable the police, the justice system, and the media.
I appreciate you pulling all of that together for us, because this story has been so heartbreaking. And, I do not understand how people can look at whether it's the death of Jason Arday or all these other folks in the US. I mean, the dozens and dozens of lynchings that have gone ruled as suicides, as you've mentioned. I don't understand how folks look at that and think like, oh yeah, no big deal. Blame them. And
Mm-hmm.
that's also the racism, right? And it's not just, I mean, Jason Arday's story obviously starts with these accusations from somebody who is a flagrant eugenicist who, you listen to him talk and it's so obvious. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that there's still, even in 2026, people who are like, oh, well, that person's racist. I can hear it. I can
Mm-hmm.
tell. Racists are bad people, as opposed to racism is in the air we breathe and the water we drink, and we are surrounded by it at all times because we live in a racialized society. And so it really takes so much more critical attention to be able to see, like, whoa, there's so much more to this than like one bad guy.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that people struggle with racism is people who are not Black, I should say, just thinking about or getting stuck thinking about it's like bad actors, individual people, when in fact we have racist systems, right, and structures. And that's what's causing the most harm. And that's like things like taking away the critical portions of the Voting Rights Act. That's an act, a structurally racist act. There are racist individuals who contributed to that decision being made. But now that decision has been made, actually, there don't need to be any racist people. We know there are racist people, but there doesn't need to be racist people for that harm to keep being enacted in election after election after election. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I appreciate you making that point, because it's not just individual bad actors like Nathan Coffness. Nathan Coffness is taking advantage of other people's racism and the fact that the systems are built to support his views and not to defend someone who was vulnerable and marginalized like Professor Arday was.
And I think, like so many other folks in conservative spaces, whether it's in the US or it's in the UK, there's a lot of money to be made in being in this outrageous, outlandish, bombastic, just totally open-faced way of behaving. And that it's like this insult to injury doesn't even begin to categorize how horrible that is.
Oh, and I should note, just for everyone's knowledge, that Nathan Coffness has now been suspended by his university.
It turns out you can't say just anything you want, no matter where you work. He didn't learn it the first time.
No, he didn't learn it the first time because he doesn't see that he did anything wrong the first time, right? Like, so he sees that he was treated unjustly by Cambridge when they let him go. I mean, he sued them. He did not win. He's
And
now
he
appealing.
lost.
Anyway. Yeah. But he was suspended, and they're now doing an investigation with the university putting out a statement this morning. I mean, I think it was yesterday for them now, depending on what time zone you're in. But they put out a statement that they said the statement on respect for human dignity and opposition to discrimination. And they said, we wish to be
Seems a
clear
little
about
late.
the values. I know. We wish to be clear about the values we uphold as a university. Ghent University stands for respect for human dignity and opposes discrimination, hatred, and racism. Anyway, so that's all happening, which I think Nathan Coffness is going to use to try to gain even more fame and notoriety for himself, because now he's been wronged. He has been wronged. I should just... Okay, I'd say there's so many things about this, but the last thing I want to say...
Just like, listen, like for people at home, I literally had to pick up a stress ball in order to have this conversation with you. Like, I'm so mad. I'm so mad.
Oh, I mean, any reasonable person would be infuriated by this. I had posted a video about this. I posted multiple videos about this tragedy, and I posted something today, and somebody wrote, "Who cares?" And I wrote back, "Any decent person," but apparently that's not you. Okay, last thing I really did want to say, though, about Nathan Coffness is that on Monday, when there was that vigil for Professor Arday in London, Nathan Coffness posted that it was an anti-Coffness hate rally. Like, how disgusting a person do you have to be to take away a memorial for someone you harmed so deeply and to make it about you, not even allow space for people to mourn and grieve that loss, and to make it about you? It's a despicable person who does that. But yes, no doubt he will ride this to fame and glory in a similar way that Riley Gaines has used coming in fifth to catapult an entire career.
Being not as good of an athlete as she wanted to be.
Yes. One thing that we just didn't have time to talk about, but I want to just highlight in case folks are curious, is that Nathan Coffness himself, there are a lot of concerns about like his academic work. And in fact, when he was appointed...
My level of surprise is zero.
Yeah, I know. So when he was appointed, there was a lot of opposition to his appointment because of the poor quality of his work. And in fact, there are academics who have said they do not believe he was the most qualified candidate for the position to which he was appointed, which is a postdoc position, mind you. So this is a postdoc tearing down a professor. I know there's so many issues here. And as you said, like, are we surprised that a man who was deemed by his peers to be mediocre at his job was pissed off that a Black man was successful? No, we are not surprised. But what is deeply upsetting is that the media went along with it and played right into his hands and chose to support that narrative without questioning who it was that who had even planted this story for them in the first place. And that is enough on Nathan Coffness. In fact, that's probably too much on a racist eugenicist who really does not belong. If you want to talk about who doesn't belong in academia, it's that person. I want to end this portion of our conversation by saying rest in power to Jason Arday. And then also, of course, our thoughts are with his family. I did want to just share two things that folks can do if they want to help out here. So one is there's a GoFundMe that was put together by a friend of the family, and that money, can support funeral costs and the children and, all sorts of things. So if folks want to donate to that, I'll put the link in the show notes. And then the other is that there are folks in the UK who are calling for an investigation into how the media handled this story. And so they have a letter that we can, I've already signed it, but that folks can sign. And all it is saying, please, something has gone very wrong here, and there should be an investigation into the media's handling of this. So I'll put a link to that as well.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Well, as a palate cleanser, let's talk about AI.
Yeah, great.
Your favorite topic. I have to be aware of a lot of AI tools and the ways that they get used or not used in healthcare contexts, for part of my job and for some of the oversight work that I do. And so I'm familiar with many of the AI tools that are available. So for folks who have not heard of it before, there is a tool called Open Evidence. I don't really think that they branded themselves that well because it sounds a lot like it's just part of OpenAI, which it's not, if they're competitors in a way. But Open Evidence is specifically a large language model, so an LLM, that is geared specifically towards clinicians. And one of the things that they require in order to make an account for you to have free unlimited access is to have a national provider identification number. So if you're a physician, you're a nurse, you're a social worker, you get assigned a national provider identifier number, and that's this like unique number that you can use. We use it across a bunch of different things with our licensing, et cetera. So in order to get access to Open Evidence, you need to have an NPI. So that initially, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, ew, gross. I believe in the democratization of knowledge. I think that the role of, physicians and nurses is integral in terms of healthcare delivery and access to information. But the reality is that like patients have been Googling their symptoms since Google came out. And like, there was a lot of hand wringing about patients. Oh no, they're Googling their symptoms and they have questions. Like, yeah, like searching for things is something that humans do. Doctors use Google too. I used Google, when I was in medical school and residency to like find things. I still use it. Like if I need to find the most up-to-date, national guidelines on something, like we all are using search engines. This is part of what we do. You and I have lots and lots of feelings about AI in general and the way that it's like accelerating, climate catastrophe, et cetera. That's it. AI is clearly here. Patients are using it. Doctors are using it. Open Evidence sent me an email last night at 7:30 at night when I was like, I wanted to like soothe myself and get ready for bed. But I made the mistake of checking my email. I shouldn't have done that. That's on me. That's on me. But I'm going to... Like the gatekeeping in medicine makes me bananas. And so when I see it cropping up in like a new flavor, it is like nails on a chalkboard to me. So this is the email I get from Open Evidence last night. And it says, introducing patient take homes. And like, they got me with the subject line because I was like, what are these folks up to? And they are basically touting that as a physician or a nurse, if you're using Open Evidence to look up, I think of it as like, it's sort of like if you want to aggregate, like, what are the papers that are available on this topic? Like, you still have to read all of the papers because just like any LLM, I don't trust it to be correct. But so they're like, oh, well, you could actually take that information and you could summarize it and then send a link to your patient. And so your patient could read it. And I was like, okay, well, sure. If you are a physician and you're going to vet that information is correct, and you think that will help your patient and you're going to send them a link to it, like super duper. I'm like, okay, I'll keep reading. I'll keep reading. And it says, patient take homes are a new, fully optional way to share specific, curated clinical evidence with your patients. They underlined this part, fully at your discretion, by converting Open Evidence answers into patient handouts. Okay, so like patient education, it's hard. We want to be able to send people home with things that make sense. There's a real paucity of like effective handouts for a lot of very basic things. Like we shouldn't all be having to make them. That's a whole other thing. But as I look into it, they have like certain things that are, bolded or highlighted or whatever that like they really want you to see. And the thing that really, really stuck out to me was a little bit later where it said your patient receives a secure link by email to Open Evidence Take Home where they can read their take home and share it with family members or caregivers. On take home, underlined in bold, patients are not able to ask their own questions. They are only able to see the content that you curate for them. And I just thought, like, it is the year of our Lord 2026. And we still think that we should be the gatekeepers of medical knowledge for our patients. And like, if you don't give patients access, like, I don't know. And if Open Evidence thinks like they're the cat's meow or whatever, like, what are they afraid of? What are they afraid of letting people look it up? Because,
or what do they think physicians are afraid of?
Yeah.
Like, why is that?
Exactly.
Why are they touting that as a good thing? Oh, your patients won't be able to ask questions. To me, that's
it's embarrassing.
Like, why would you not want your patients to be able to ask questions?
Yeah, it's so offensive to me, and it's also something where, like, obviously, if open evidence truly believes that they are better, they believe that they're like better than ChatGPT or they're better than Doximity GPT or like all these other things that are available, Gemini, like these free ones.
Mhm.
Patients are just going to go to what's free.
Yeah.
So all this tells me is that if you think that what you have to offer is better than what's available on those platforms, you are just denying it to patients and you think that
Mhm.
it's serving physicians.
Mhm.
But also, like, why is it that at this point in time, we're still saying, like, as a medical culture, feeding into this idea that, like, we need to be the gatekeepers of all of this knowledge that patients want? It's so expensive to get healthcare. Many people cannot afford to get healthcare if they can even get access to a clinician. And
Mhm.
so it should not be any surprise that people have been like, wow, well, I relied on Dr. Google to find me some information about how worried I should be. And now I'm going to use an AI tool in order to find that information. I found the marketing of this tool to physicians to be embarrassing for doctors because, like you said, what is it that doctors are afraid of? Are we afraid? I mean, like, yeah, are there some patients who are going to come in kind of freaked out because they go down some rabbit hole? Yeah, but like that is not new. I'm much more worried about patients being like, oh, my doctor will let me have some information, but they're trying to stop me from having something. Like, where do you think these people are just going to go to some other tool that's free?
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. And it's the same idea of like I'm looking for something because somebody replied to a post I had yesterday about um why people don't like, dislike, don't trust physicians. And this person's response was really kind of in line with what you were talking about because they said something like they were making fun of the fact that patients will look up their own symptoms. Um, and I was like, why would you not want that? Yeah, they wrote, yes, if we own, so the whole point of my video was that like a lot of patients feel like they're not listened to, their symptoms are dismissed, they are misdiagnosed. So they experience a lot of harm at the hands of the healthcare system. And this person's reply was, yes, if we only paid more attention to the ChatGPT readout that told them it was their lisinopril that was causing the bradycardia and not the metoprolol. So for folks who aren't in medicine, like lisinopril doesn't cause bradycardia. So what this person is saying, like, is that patients are wrong because they're using a source that's wrong, blah, blah, blah. But the real problem there, it seemed to me, is that this person has a frustration with patients trying to understand what is going on with their own health. Because even if someone comes to you with that, then you have an opportunity to teach them, right? What's the harm? Like, why are you so upset that people dare to try to understand what's happening with their bodies, especially when they know their time with us is limited because of how terrible our healthcare system is. And
Mhm.
so visits are short. People often have multiple things they're trying to get accomplished. So, like, it seems to me, it's very concerning that people have a negative view on patients trying to understand what happens, why they might be having certain symptoms, what might be causing the problem, who might come in even with like potential ideas for treatments or medications or labs. They're doing that because they're not sure if you're going to have the time and the capacity to do what they actually need. And they're just trying to get the care they actually need. Why are
And
we
we're
upset about
we're
that?
in a crisis of trust in healthcare generally. And like, for example, like so many of the criticisms, for example, and you and I have talked a lot about you know, vaccine beliefs and like how is it that people, oh, I do my own research and you should do your own research and all that stuff. But the peer reviewed research, it exists behind these paywalls.
Hmm.
It's very expensive to get access to this information. It is difficult to understand, and like if LLMs are going to be a way to simplify some of that information to at least steer somebody in the right direction, like I don't think that that's something that we should think is inherently bad or that we should be making fun of patients for. And because there's also a lot of patients who might actually come and see us if they could find information that would be like, hey, go to a doctor. You might need
Yeah.
help.
Yeah. And I think there's kind of like that person's comment confounds two different issues.
Sure.
At least. So to me, like patients trying to understand what's happening with their bodies and what might help them is always a legitimate thing for patients. I mean, it's crazy I have to say that. It's always a legitimate thing for patients to do and to then want to discuss with their physicians. A separate question of like, should they be using ChatGPT or any LLM versus like Googling whatever? My feelings are, I think, pretty clear. But regardless, I think the central question and the reason I brought that up is this idea that like, oh, only we should have access to information. And that doesn't make any sense because patients have way more time. Yeah. And patients have way more time to think about what's going on with them than we do. So it's actually like an alliance, right? If they come in with like, here's what I've learned, and then you're pulling from your medical knowledge and together maybe you can figure it out. That's way better than a patient with complex issues showing up to a 15-minute visit and all you can barely understand is what even the symptoms are before the visit is over.
Well, and like, honestly, I wouldn't, like, if my car is broken, like, I'm going to do a little research before I just show up at the mechanic. Like, I don't have enough knowledge to understand if I'm getting good care at the mechanics. I don't. And so, like, obviously, I'm going to look that up. And the idea that patients wouldn't do the same, I just think it's totally unrealistic. And I think it's dismissive of our patients. And like, there are some patients where, yeah, they're going to come in with like a really wacky interpretation of whatever they've found. And like, but that's also not new. So I don't know. It frustrates me. Like, I don't ever anything that says disempower patients to learn about their bodies, I think is a bad move.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely right. And I know there's lots of stuff to discuss about AI specifically in healthcare, which maybe we can do at another time. But certainly, I think this attitude of like the knowledge should stay with us and not go to our patients doesn't make sense.
Well, and like clearly, no matter what the technology is that's being assessed, like this advertisement sent to me is trying to play on the idea that doctors feel they must maintain control about what access to information patients have. And I just think they're dead wrong.
Well, I think that that attitude is wrong, but I do think there are some doctors who feel that way. And that's the problem, right? Like that patients are finding themselves with physicians who either don't want to or can't or don't have time to explain things. And so they're just like, here, we're going to get these labs, but I'm not going to tell you why because we don't really have time to get into it. You know what I mean? So there's, problems at multiple levels.
Yeah. Well, and this is what I mean too about like, people there's those mugs that say like, don't confuse your Google search with my medical degree. And like, yeah, it's a little funny. It's a little true. It's a little bit rude. Like the technology is going to keep changing, but like if the attitude never changes, we will never move past this.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Well, I think that we should just go through our list of all the things that we like wish we could do a full episode on, but like we chose not to this week.
Yeah. And as always, the list is long.
We already did Heidi Overton, thankfully. So one down.
Yeah. Excellent. At the top of the list that I had is Lindsay Clancy. So folks will know, of course, that this is a trial that's ongoing. Lindsay Clancy is a woman who is accused of having killed her 3 children. A lot of the story is revolving around her mental health and issues after she had her 3rd child, with an extensive record of seeking care with psychiatrists, psychologists, even an inpatient stay. And so the defense is, in essence, arguing that she was not well at the time that this happened. The prosecution is arguing that she is a premeditated murderer who carried and birthed and raised 3 children and then decided to kill them all and tried to kill herself. Anyway, so
it's been a really hard news cycle to watch.
Yes, it's obviously a tragedy that this happened, regardless of what all did or didn't happen before. The fact is that these 3 young children are gone. Lindsay Clancy herself is paralyzed from a fall. There's some theories. There are lots of internet theories about whether she was pushed or fell or whatever, but she is paralyzed, and so she's in the courtroom now having to listen to all of this. Um, more to come for sure on that story. Do you want to talk about kindergartners?
Kindergartners, oh my gosh. So annually, the CDC reports the rate of kindergartners who are up to date on their vaccines. And unfortunately, yet again, US kindergartners vaccine coverage has downtrended another year. It's fallen another 0.1% in the last school year. And unfortunately, this has been declining every year except one since the onset of COVID. And unfortunately, this is really fueled by vaccine exemptions, which were at a high of 3.6% and have now increased to 4.2%. And the exemptions rose in 41 states and Washington, D.C. Vaccine coverage decreased in more than half of the states. This is bad, bad, bad. I continue to be nervous about the kinds of diseases that are going to clinicians like myself who take care of children are going to start seeing things that we have just never seen before. Because in the past, we always had a really highly vaccinated population. So super scary. This comes out every year. And of course, this is no surprise after everything that we've talked about on this show about our clown car of public health in the United States and how they are just continuing to decrease confidence in vaccination, continuing to do all sorts of things that really dismantle public health in America. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, Heidi Overton, yet one more person going into the FDA potentially who has also fueled anti-vaccine or vaccine skepticism. So very concerning. Don't like it. Zero stars. Do not recommend.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's very worrisome for school children, and a direct consequence of what has been said by the leaders, so-called leaders in this country. We wanted to follow up on our story from last week about the USS Lincoln, the ship that has been deployed for many, many months with inadequate food supplies, hygienic supplies, etc. So they are finally going to be brought back out of deployment, which is, I think, only because of public pressure and the families of those deployed to raise awareness of what was happening. And so despite the president saying things like he was asked, has that deployment gone on too long? And he said, it's not gone on long enough. I mean, while he's like golfing or anyway. So that ship is coming back. That is good news. And we hope that everyone on board will be able to get some rest and food and get some semblance of healthy behaviors going or accessible to them after that long deployment. The last thing on this list is Republicans have been kind of losing their minds over a statement that John Ossoff made at a rally. And I think we should just listen to it. It's a short clip. Give me 1 second to play it.
And while the sailors on the Lincoln fight his war, while he fruitlessly drains our munitions and oil reserves, the president sleeps through his meetings. He golfs and trades stocks. See, he doesn't want to do the job. He wants to build his ballroom and travel with Natalie on their apparently defenseless flying palace gifted by the Emir of Qatar.
So a lot of conservatives are disingenuously acting like they care that he mentioned a woman. How dare he talk about a woman in a negative way? So disrespectful.
That's how they're responding?
Yes. So Natalie, for folks who don't know, Natalie is like the president's personal assistant, essentially. Some people call her the human printer. So when things need to be shown to him, she's the one who prints them out. She writes a lot of the Truth Social posts that are on his account. So she's a 36-year-old woman, I believe. It's very weird. She spent a summer living in a locker room because there wasn't like room for her to be where he was. So she stayed in a locker room at the country club nearby. There are reports that at one point when they were traveling together from one place to another, there wasn't room for her in the car, so she rode in the trunk. She's written letters that are weird. Okay, the whole thing is weird. Her brother has gone on TV to be like, we hope she wakes up and snaps out of it soon, essentially. So that's who Natalie is. And a lot of conservatives have decided that Ossoff was like implying there was an affair or something, which, I mean, he doesn't say that. He just says that the president would like to be traveling with Natalie in the plane that he was gifted from Qatar, right? But it's been just fascinating to see that this is the thing that people picked up on. Like, they were so outraged that he dared to mention Natalie, and all these stories that I'm telling you, like the locker room and the trunk, that didn't come out before. Reporters were like sitting on these stories about Natalie for who knows why.
Well, yeah,
and then all of a sudden,
heard of her before.
Exactly. Because they weren't talking about her, even though she seems to have a quite influential role in like what the president's aware of, what he's posting, etc.
Who has paid the media for her to be off limits until now?
Well, this is the question. Like, why were they holding on to these stories until their hand was basically forced by Ossoff to start talking about it, because it was such a major story that like they had to cover it. It's weird.
And just based on
really
that comment, so weird.
Yes, just based on that one comment, because conservatives got like so upset about it. And, you know, they're talking about how he was so disrespectful to women. Excuse me? Who is every day disrespectful to women? The president. And they're like in defense of the president and Natalie. Like, it's wild to watch how much of a reaction this has gotten. And even some Democrats have been like, I think he went too far. He went too far? He just said that the president likes to travel with Natalie. Yeah, what are you talking about? This is why we'll never win. Like, this is going too far, just like stating the fact that he travels with this. I mean, she's with him pretty much everywhere.
I thought grab him by the pussy was too far, but that was a long time ago.
Yeah, apparently that was super respectful. But talking about Natalie on a plane, yeah, definitely disrespectful. I don't understand, but that's
okay.
Anyway, so if people want to learn about some weird stuff happening between the president and this young woman, Natalie Harp is her name, and there's no shortage of stories about her. Let's talk about happy things.
Okay. Take 2. Call me in the morning. Prescribe me something.
Yeah. So I came across these videos. I saw one, and I didn't know that it was like a whole genre of video, actually. But these women who I think I might have mentioned to you before, not on the show, who go to like some kung fu training place. It's like these monks, and they do really challenging physical things. And it turns out, like, I guess there's like a lot of young women going there, because I just like since then I keep seeing different women. So either they're AI generated, I had that thought, or it's like a real thing that like all these different women are going to these like training programs, and because they're all posted by this account master somebody. I'll put a link in the show notes, and you know they'll show a woman like standing with her arm out, and somebody's breaking I'm sweaty. Somebody's breaking like a sorry, I just noticed that. Gross. It's warm in my house. Anyway, so somebody's breaking a piece of wood like on her arm, and or like on her back or on her stomach or whatever. And the early part of the video, you'll see the person, the trainee, like reacting right with pain, and then like and the wood doesn't break. But then later on, they're like strong, and now the wood breaks and they still hurt, but they're like yes. And they're just doing crazy things, and it just feels so nice to see women being strong and I don't know, doing cool things. So I'll put a link to one of the videos in the show notes.
You sent me at least one of these videos before, and so I'd started watching some of them, and like it's very like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Like there's all these like wild stunts that they're doing. They're like leaping off the wall and chopping things, and it's very cool. It's very cool. Yeah, I agree.
So go women. Is the bottom line. What's your take too?
Those videos definitely made me dream about like quitting it all and heading to be trained.
Yes. I would love to do it. Anyway.
So I have been watching Sterling Point with my family. It is like a teen drama. It all takes place like up in Canada, like on an island outside of Toronto. You have to like take a seaplane to get there. It's very remote. And there's like a whole bunch of like familial drama happening. There's like multi-generational family drama. There's a lot of teen drama. It's very like queer forward. There's a lot of fun characters. There's a couple of things I don't love about it, which is that they are showing people smoking and showing quite young kids drinking quite extensively. So I have a lot of feelings, in particular about smoking, because there's been so much work, like on network shows, you can't show people smoking during certain hours, for example, as part of settlements that came out of smoking stuff. But anyway, the other thing that I have noticed in this show, and like for folks that I don't want to do any spoilers, but like my thesis about this show is that it only exists because every adult in this show is a terrible, immature parent. Like there are no adults in this show who have made good choices, and you're basically getting like the story evolves when like this generation of kids who are like the result of a lot of parental drama and like family drama. So it's every time there's like a new plot twist, I'm like, one more dumb adult decision come to haunt them. So if you want to learn what not to do as a parent, also Sterling Point, wonderful. I'm also watching it with my teenager, which is fun.
Okay. I'll add it. I'll add it to my list.
It's good. It's catchy. It's a fun show.
That's it. Well, that seems like a lot. That's it for this week's episode. If you didn't like what you heard, this has been Story Time with the Second Lady. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to The President List, leave us a review, and tell other folks about us as well.
We know that you do not need Usha Vance to read to you, so please follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at The Present Illness, and you can stay on top of all of our TPI-related news.
We will be back next week with more headlines, hot takes, and doom scrolling, hopefully wrapped in some laughs.
Until then, agitate, hydrate, take a nap, and we'll see you next time on The Present Illness. Production by Arga Gonzalez and Alyssa Burgart. Editing by Alyssa Burgart. Social media by Arga Gonzalez. Original music by Joseph Uphoff. Don't take medical advice from random people on a podcast. This show's for informational purposes. It's meant to be fun, and it's certainly not medical advice. Please take your medical questions to a qualified professional. This podcast is our hobby, and it does not represent the opinions of our employers, just ourselves.